Welcome, everybody, to this Climate Pollinator webinar. We are delighted that you have joined us for this last of our 5 webinars. My name is Doug Graber-Neufeld, and I am the chair of the Creation Care Task Force of Mennonite World Conference. This webinar is a collaboration between Mennonite World Conference and the Anabaptist Climate Collaborative, and originated as a survey project of the task force. The Creation Care Task Force has representatives from each of 5 Mennonite World Conference regions. And at this time, I'll introduce Jennifer Schrock Halteman, who will be moderating the webinar once the presenters start. Jennifer is at Goshen College and was a leader for years of the Mennonite Creation Care Network, which many of you are familiar with. Anna Vogt, who is with the MCC Ottawa office, is also a North America member of the task force, but was ill this morning and couldn't join us. I just want to start to mention several logistical items to pay attention to. We know the stories will prompt questions, and there will be time after the presentations to ask questions. So please save those questions to the end. If you're speaking, it's most helpful if you don't speak too quickly, as this is being translated into Spanish for several of our attendees. If you're able and comfortable, we do invite you to consider turning on your cameras. Zoom is not the same as being in person, but seeing faces can be one small step in helping us build community. At the same time, we recognize that's not possible for everyone, and please be aware that we're recording this webinar, and it's being live streamed on Facebook, so comments and images from the hour are publicly available. We are using Discord as an online platform for continuing these conversations from all the webinars, and you'll see information in the chat box on how to join that. Carla Braun and Prishit Rao are both handling many of the logistical and technical details of the webinar, so thanks to them. And finally, I want to personally thank the presenters today. We're truly blessed by your presence and your stories, and so we appreciate you taking some time to share your thoughts. And at this time, I want to pass it on to Doug Kaufman, who is the director of the Anabaptist Climate Collaborative.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. I'm happy to be here as a co-sponsor of this event. Anabaptist Climate Collaborative works to inspire and equip individuals, congregations, and organizations to seek climate justice through Anabaptist values, community, and faith. And among other things, we empower diverse voices. And though we're based in North America, we're happy to be part of this global conversation, although this time it's more North American. Another one of our strategies is to develop emerging leaders, and so I'm happy to introduce Sierra Ross Richer. She's a recent graduate of Goshen College. She is one of the leaders that has worked with us on a number of things, was part of the Climate Ride a couple of summers ago, and was the interviewer and writer for the series that's now a book, Climate Pollinator, and that has inspired this webinar series. So Sierra, I invite you now to introduce our webinar participants today.
Hi, everyone. As Doug said, I'm Sierra Ross Richer, and I wrote the Climate Pollinator series for ACC last spring. The Climate Pollinator is a collection of 48 short articles which were originally published as daily Lenten readings and later were compiled into a book, which you can find on the ACC website. Just an aside, I want to point out that Lent is coming around again tomorrow. So if you didn't read the stories last spring, you might want to consider reading them during Lent this year. The stories in the series focus on the questions, how are Anabaptists around the world experiencing climate change, and what are they doing to respond? This is the 5th and last webinar in this series. Those of you who have attended or watched recordings of the previous webinars probably noticed that the conversations have varied with each location. Not only are people in different places experiencing different environmental effects from climate change, but the cultural context we live in mean we each have unique challenges and responsibilities when it comes to responding to this global crisis. We can learn from what people around the world are doing, but we also must find solutions that fit our places and our contexts. So, as you know, today's webinar will focus on North America. And before we launch into the presentations, I want to talk a little bit more about the region. For each continent that we've covered, I've shared some of the prominent climate change impacts that people are facing. Like every other continent, North America is experiencing changes as the planet warms. Heat waves, severe storms, flooding, droughts, changing weather patterns, decreasing snowpack, and warming ocean waters are some of the effects reported by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for North America. What makes North America unique is its oversized role in contributing to the climate catastrophe. According to the IPCC report, together the United States, Canada, and Mexico are responsible for 1/4 of the greenhouse gases produced worldwide, while they account for only 6.4% of the world's human population. I don't think it's news to anyone that the lifestyle of most North Americans is environmentally unsustainable. Some estimate it would take 5 planets to support the world's population if everyone used as many resources as Americans. So what are Anabaptists in North America doing in the face of this reality? I think it's fair to say that most of the people I interviewed said not enough. That doesn't mean that there isn't work being done. And as I looked back through the 16 interviews I had with people in Canada and the United States, a couple of themes emerged. The first was a focus on land. For most people I talked to, ties to this continent don't go back more than a couple of generations at the most. The history of settler colonialism provides the foundation for current land relations and use. Exploitation and degradation of the land have been widespread for the last few centuries since Europeans, including Mennonites, settled in North America. In the midst of this reality, I was encouraged to speak with Anabaptists who are grappling with what it means to respect Indigenous sacred sites, how to best steward church land, what it looks like to work with other species to restore healthy ecosystems, and how to grow food in ways that doesn't deplete the soil. The second theme that stood out to me had to do with lifestyle. The Western lifestyle is obviously a driver of climate change and environmental destruction, and a number of my interviewees pointed out that it will take major lifestyle changes for us to live in a way that is sustainable for the climate. While many said it is hard to know where to start, they identified areas where they are working to change. The list includes diet, waste production and management, food growing, and travel. So today we'll hear from 2 groups of presenters, a pair from Albuquerque Mennonite Church in New Mexico, USA, and a group from a subsistence farm in Ontario, Canada. They're both doing work around these themes of land and lifestyle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer. And as has already been said, I'm the North American representative on the MWC task force. I'll be assisting with our discussion time. I just want to say one thing before Sierra introduces our presenters in more detail. I don't know the Canada group, but I have had many interactions with the Albuquerque Mennonite Church, and I'm glad that you will be hearing from them. Over the last 15 years, I have Mennonite, they have been doing something related to Mennonite Creation Care Network many of those years, probably all of them. And many churches do one thing and then stop. They have had a long-term commitment, and that's really what climate work takes. I believe it's the same for the group in Canada. Sierra, could you tell us a little bit more about them?
So our first group of presenters are joining from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Sue Brown and Donna Detweiler are both members of the Faith in Action Committee at Albuquerque Mennonite Church. That's a group that over the years has worked on projects to make the church building more sustainable. They've organized wild church meetups and engaged with Indigenous groups in the work of dismantling the doctrine of discovery, among other things. Sue is a pediatrician and one of the founders of the Mid-Rio Grande Times, a monthly magazine that provides news and resources on sustainable land stewardship for the area. She will share with us about the work of planting and tending trees on the church property. And then Donna Detweiler is the team lead for the Faith in Action group. Outside of church, she works as a garden teacher and apartment manager. And Donna will share with us about efforts at the church to reduce and repurpose waste. So welcome, Sue and Donna.
Good morning. Yes, Donna and I decided we'd divide up the aspects that we're going to talk about. So as you heard, I'm going to talk about our trees. And our tree project began in 2013. And the reason was that when we bought the church, it was on 3 city lots. And then there are 4 city lots of a parking lot. And there was 1 tree on the whole property, on the whole 7 lots, 0 shrubs, no irrigation for anything. So it was rather formidable. And we began by actually just planting a few trees on the south side of the building in order to provide shade and to try to cut down some of our costs for heating, our energy uses. But in 2013, we got a little more organized about this whole thing. And our facilities committee coughed up the money for 7 of us to go and take a class on landscaping. And we took it at our community college. And our teacher was very into landscaping, more into the design as how you would do a streetscape. And that wasn't exactly maybe the best approach for us, but anyhow, that's what happened. And we, in the class, she asked us early on to each to divide ourselves up into segments of our property. So someone signed up to do the street along the streets, the 7 lots. Someone signed up to do the courtyard. Or backing up a little, our building has been built at 3 different phases, and it's in a U shape. And so in the center, there's a courtyard. So there's the courtyard, and then there's a sign in front of our church and a bare space. So that became the sign group. And then the 4 city lots, i.e. the parking lot, I and then another man became responsible for that area. Our teacher had us take pictures, in fact, of what our areas looked like before, so we could, be happy about how much they changed afterwards. So the next thing we did, we had a member of the congregation who knew a lot about irrigation. So she put in the irrigation for us, and that was a really big task. And we also ended up hiring a company to help complete that task. The next thing is that we realized our soil was horrible. I mean, it had been compacted. The parking lot, for example, had been compacted by cars and covered by asphalt and all its chemicals for years and years and years. And on top of that, we have a problem in New Mexico with a clay, and if it's compacted, it becomes caliche, which is practically like a cheap pottery, and it's very difficult for any water to penetrate it. So yeah, those problems were formidable. We ended up then designing how we wanted each area to look. And our teacher suggested ash trees for the entire 7 lots along the road. And that was the type of tree that is most frequently used for streetscapes in Albuquerque. And so that was sort of the mindset that we began this whole process with. The next thing that happened is that in order to particularly do something about the parking lot, we decided that we would dig up a lot of the asphalt. And not only did we have to dig it up, but we had to recycle it. And fortunately, there was a company in Albuquerque that would take recycled our old asphalt. There was also a huge amount of concrete on our property, particularly in the courtyard. And so we ended up hammering up that concrete. We hired a company that knew how to saw up the concrete so we could recycle most of it on the property by building steps in an area. We also built a drop-off bench out of the concrete blocks that we had made. Then the rest of the concrete, we had 20 tons of it. We took to a company in town that could recycle that. And 5 tons we sort of buried in different areas on our lot and covered with soil. So that's the story of the concrete and the asphalt. I'm going to then mention about tree planting. We learned that, we had to dig the holes so they were half as wide all the way around as the ball of the tree that we were about to plant. We learned that you couldn't put the roots down below where the knob of the graft of the tree was. That had to be equal to the soil. So we were very careful not to dig the holes too deep. And in retrospect, that might have been part of a problem because the soil was so compacted that we maybe should have been digging much deeper. But nonetheless, that was the advice from people who had more experience in planting trees than we did. So we also had a man in the church who knew about micro I don't know how to say it, mycorrhizomes, I guess it is. And so we bought a lot of the powder of mycorrhizomes and did put that in with our trees, which was brilliant because again, with all that asphalt sitting over where we were planting trees, it was really nice to give them a little start, at least to develop a good root system laterally. But I wanted to go on also and talk about some of our problems, because I think that's really important when we're approaching planting, doing reforesting on our properties. One is that we hadn't been thinking as carefully about climate change that was coming up. I think we all gave lip service to it. We had an awareness, but this was again in 2013, and it wasn't on the top of our agenda probably 11 years ago. And since that time, the Sierra Club and a leader in another organization in town got busy and globally figured out the trees that would be best for our climate. And they called it climate ready trees. And they made a list of about 100 trees and ranked them according to their ability to tolerate heat and their ability to have erratic precipitation. And also their tolerance for cold, heat and cold. And it turns out that, well, in our tree planting phase, we planted 19 trees, and our one tree actually died. but we have 19 different trees now. But we planted most of our trees were not climate ready, and in this new listing. And so as trees die or age, whatever, we're going to replant with things that are definitely on the list as climate ready trees. We also ended up planting something that was a climate ready tree, actually, an Afghan pine, in an area that was against a cement wall and in front of some of the remaining asphalt in the parking lot. And that was way too much heat. And so we lost a climate ready tree because we multiplied the heat too much. Another thing is that when a church is doing any project, it's like a family with a lot of members, and there are a lot of different ideas as to what should be done. And even though we had designs as to what was to happen in each area, people just showed up and volunteered to plant other things here and there. So that's sort of, I don't know, I guess it's sort of important as a community to honor that, but the landscape doesn't quite look like it was originally intended to look. A couple last remarks I wanted to make is about fruit trees. There was a lot of interest that we should plant fruit trees, and we decided not to because the fruit, we couldn't keep up with cleaning it up, and people would be slipping on it and it'd be falling on their cars and blah, blah, blah. So that didn't come up. That was, it came up, but it was a decision not to plant fruit trees. So, and the last thing, since we're in an urban area, I wanted to mention that we also have problems with theft at our property. We had landscape rocks, but many got stolen of the landscape rocks. We had a drop-off bench that we made from our recycled concrete, which got stolen. We had tables in our tables and chairs in our courtyard area got stolen. Logs in another area of the parking lot in some area we called the Orisha, which was a culinary and therapeutic, was to be a culinary and therapeutic herb garden, but anyhow the logs got stolen. So yeah, it's just one of those things. It's a work in progress. We're always doing something and always looking for volunteers in the church to help us weed. Well, that's the end of it.
Thank you so much, Sue. Can we go to Donna now?
Good morning. Really happy to be here with everybody and eager to hear more what's happening in other places as well.
And Donna, I'm wondering if you could kind of give a quick summary. We're a little bit behind our time and we need to honor it. So if you could give a quick summary, and then maybe after the other group and the closure, we can come back to you and hear a little bit more detail.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just in brief, what my aspect of our creation care at Albuquerque Mennonite Church entailed was waste we did a couple of dumpster audits to try to figure out what was in there, what could be reused as for compost or for recycling. And that was a treasure hunt, as has been composting. I found like 10 metal baby spoons in our compost at one point. And so it's been quite fun. I really enjoy composting. I would say that one of our challenges has been to try to figure out how to be more communicative, I would say, around the other people that work out of our facility. Number one, we have renters, we have a daycare, we have other groups that use the place who have not been as waste aware. The daycare decided they did not want to compost because the health inspectors saw some roaches. And so we're still working on that kind of communication. Maybe I'll just let it go at that for now. And if there's other questions later, we can address them.
Thank you so much, Sue and Donna, and we will try and get back to Donna later, some more. Now we're going to hear from the Wiederkehr family about their farm and some of the ways that they have made it sustainable and climate friendly. Go ahead.
So I'm Andre, and this is Thea. Our work towards sustainability is relatively young. Many of the choices and systems we will talk about are only a few years old, but we also think that the changes we're making in our lives are already significant, and we hope some of what we can share today will be helpful.
So in one of the articles Sierra wrote about us, we talked about what has become a foundational concept for us, which guides our work. That's the idea of linear and cyclical resource use. Currently, our society is based on linear resource use, where we extract raw materials, make them into what we need, use it up, throw out the waste, and go get more raw materials. And that model hasn't distinguished very much between renewable and non-renewable resources. And it also causes problems both on the extraction end, where it causes resource exhaustion, which is a key driver of colonization and war, and on the waste end, where pollution causes problems like climate change. And so in contrast, we think that we need to live towards a cyclical model of resource use, where the wastes from everything we use cycle back into the raw materials, which meet our needs over and over again. That means we can't use non-renewable resources, and we can only use renewable resources at a rate which is equal to or less than their rate of recharge. And for us as Mennonites, that's part of the work of pacifism, living up to our beliefs there because of the violence which is done both by the destruction the waste cause and by the destruction as we grasp for more resources on the supply end. And in earlier pollinators from Africa and from South America, we heard about stories of that suffering, which our brothers and sisters are already starting to feel with mining and with climate change. So this is our part of trying to take the log out of our own eye. So in one of the articles, Sierra talked about our compost toilet system, which for us is when we were living into this cyclical system. So we use buckets for our toilets and add high carbon cover material with our human manure, which is in our case dry leaves and hulls from grain. And then we compost all of our human manure in big bins made out of cedar poles, which sit behind our house. And the composted human manure we use in our gardens as fertilizer for our dry corn, our maize, and our squash. And so in this way, we're trying to form a closed nutrient cycle and avoid needing artificial fertilizers, which are mined or produced with fossil fuels and then in the conventional system here, flushed down toilets and lost.
The other article that Sierra wrote about us talked about our transportation choices. As a household, we still own a car, but we also all travel a lot by bicycle. We've traveled by car for most of our lives, so this is a big change for us, and it reduces our fossil fuel use a lot, replacing it with human power. We ride maybe 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers a year. We all work at home on the land and are working on meeting our needs from that land, so we don't have to commute to work or do many regular errands like for groceries. In our place, though, church, medical services, and friends are all pretty far away by bike. And we don't think cars are ultimately necessary to have any of those things, but the rural culture that we live in is built around the assumption of having cars. And that makes it pretty difficult to meet those needs, given our choices. But what we are doing shows that, at least for some people, this is a possible choice. I, for example, haven't traveled by car for several years now. Our biking illustrates a pair of behavioral choices, which we think often need to go together in our attempts to live carefully as part of creation. The one part is to change how we do things. So in this case, biking instead of driving. The other is to change which things we do, or to say it another way, how much we're trying to do. A few thousand kilometers in a year is a lot less than we used to travel. So in addition to changing how we travel, we've also chosen to diminish our demands for travel. And that article briefly mentioned that we're working on parallel kinds of diminished demands and demands and changed systems in other parts of our lives. But we want to talk a little bit more about that now.
So the other end of our compost toilet system, it's only a genuine cycle if we grow all of our own food, including staple crops which meet our needs for calories and protein. And growing enough of these crops to stay within ecological limits, while staying within our ecological limits, requires us to do a lot of thinking about which technology and techniques to use in our food growing. And basically what we've found is that we're gardening on a very large scale. And we're still figuring out how to do that. It's very much a work in progress, but here are a few of the projects we're working on. One of them is to change which crops make up most of our diet. So changing what we demand. We're finding that corn or maize and potatoes are much easier to grow and process with minimal machinery. Yeah, you can see our corn, some of our corn in the background. So they're much easier to process to the point where we can eat them. So we're eating a lot more of those and a lot less bread, and we'll expect that to continue to be a shift in our diet. And we're also growing and eating a lot more dry legumes or pulses for our protein, rather than feeding them to animals and then eating the animals. And in our climate, lentils and chickpeas are pulses which we can't really grow. And so we don't really eat those. Instead, we eat dry beans and peas, which grow easily here. And fresh eat, yeah, that slide which you were showing, I think is good to show now. We have some pictures. We're still learning how to thresh our crops. So these are some pictures from the past couple of years. In Canada, nearly all of our grains and pulses are harvested and threshed by combines, which are powered by fossil fuels. And so we've been threshing some crops by cutting them and trampling them with our feet. So you can see that with grain amaranth in the bottom left in the pictures. And that's what we do for most of our beans and peas. But that doesn't work as well for things like wheat and barley and rye, the small grains. So for those crops, we've experimented with human-powered threshing machines. Our first attempt is in the upper right, and it's a design from the US Department of Agriculture Sustainable Agriculture Research and Development Program for a little bicycle-powered thresher, flail thresher, which we built a couple of years ago. And it had a couple of flaws. So in the bottom right is a picture of our experimental new thresher, which we built this past fall. It's treadle powered and it's almost entirely wood. And it's based on a design from the 1940s from Japan, and it seems to be working better for us. But we aren't sure if it makes sense for every household to have their own thresher, but these seem like useful intermediate technologies paired with even simpler technologies in diet change. So in the top left is a picture of a corn sheller, which is a much simpler tool for an easier crop to grow.
You can switch to the other picture then. So until the last few years, we cooked mostly on an electric stove, but I also want to talk about how we're changing our cooking. In our place, about half the electricity that we use comes from nuclear power, and some of it is natural gas. And we don't think either of those energy sources is very loving or responsible toward future humans. Besides that, the equipment to produce, transmit, and use electricity tends to contain linearly used materials. So we've been trying to figure out ways to switch off of our electric stove and ovens, find other energy sources. So the main energy source for us at this point is firewood, which is captured solar energy. And if we're careful in harvesting and burning firewood, we think it can be a significant and environmentally acceptable fuel source. In the winter, we cook on our house heating stove and bake inside of it when the fire has gone down to coals. In the summer, we don't have that stove going because it's a big stove. And so we need to have other solutions. And in this, we've been inspired by something called integrated cooking method, which is a group of complementary technologies. So, sorry, the picture in the top right is our winter stove. An integrated cooking method is the other three pictures, basically. It's a rocket stove, which is a wood-burning stove there in the top left, which is supposed to be fairly fuel efficient and relatively clean burning. A solar cooker, which is below that, and that's something that just uses mirrors to reflect sunlight onto pots. That's the bottom left, and an insulated basket where food can be put to keep on cooking after it's been taken from a heat source. And fitting all of that together with integrated cooking method is still an area of active learning for us. All of the tools that we're using still, they work, but they don't work as well as they could. So the solar cooker is an example. It's good for preheating cooking water or dishwashing water. That saves a lot of energy, but it doesn't seem to have quite enough power to cook food except on the sunniest days. So we want to keep improving it.
So doing this foundational work of figuring out what tools and practices to use in growing our own food and other parts of our life, like fuel, feel really basic to me. And I keep wanting to work at a more elite level to make change on a larger scale. But as far as I can tell, this foundational work has to be done first, where the other pieces and the larger systems changes won't have a solid foundation on which to build. So I have to do this work. Parts of it I enjoy and parts of it I don't enjoy. I'm not a very physically strong or athletic person, and so I often don't enjoy the hard physical work. It's hard on my body. But on the other hand, I really enjoy the figuring out how to fit together different elements to make systems work better, like different crops to make a complete diet. And part of that work for me is saving seeds and running a little seed company, which is one way we can start sharing what we've learned and supporting others in doing the same thing.
We have lots of ideas for the place of the church in relation to this kind of work, but we'll share just two for now.
So in North America, we think that the church has an important role to encourage all of us quite wealthy and comfortable Christians to go back and work on the foundations which support our living, to challenge us, to diminish our demands, and to do our own work of changing the systems which meet our needs.
And the other thing is kind of being a support network that helps us figure that out. In our work, we're constantly borrowing ideas from people in other times and places, other cultures, who are doing things in much more environmentally sensible ways. And it would be really neat if the church could facilitate sharing of these ways of living between cultures, perhaps from so-called less developed countries to more developed countries. And that could help us learn to live better. For example, we've had a lot of trouble figuring out how to make and use a mortar and pestle for dehulling grain. But we're pretty sure there are lots of people in the world who still use that technology today and who could teach us about it. And so teaching that kind of thing across cultures could be a really neat function of the church. That's all we have to share for now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Sierra, in my haste to keep us on time, I left out your introduction. What should we know before we have some discussion time about the Wiederkamp family?
Oh, I think they said most of it now. I guess just one detail that I didn't say is that I'm living at the farm with them now too. And working together. So I guess if there are questions, I can maybe help answer some of them.
One question I have for both groups, and maybe I'll ask Albuquerque to speak first. And I'm wondering what reactions you've gotten to the things you've done on your property from the neighbors. Are there admirers, copycats, skeptics? What do you hear?
I think people have appreciated the trees, and we've heard comments about that the property looks better. So, and the other thing is that people can walk on the sidewalk in shade now. So that's positive.
I wouldn't say our neighbors have a whole lot of opinion on what we're doing. A lot of it's not that visible from the road. But I don't know, lots of people who come and visit and actually get on the property and look around the house are, I would say, at least intrigued by everything that's going on.
And also with my seed work, I often receive gratitude, and I feel gratitude for the people who have provided us with the seeds we need for our food, and we're now able to pass that on.
Other questions?
Suzanne, I was really interested in your story of planting trees because we've done that too. My husband's talked about that since before we were married, wanting to plant trees. So we planted trees right before the hot weather came, and we planted hundreds of trees. And I found that it changed the way I prayed. I prayed with desperation because I felt like I had suddenly hundreds of children. And I'm just curious, when I hear you, it sounds like you folks had irrigation, but you were worried about the soil. I'm wondering, was there any shift in your spiritual life when you planted the trees? And maybe that's a broader question for all of you when you do this work. Has it shifted your spiritual view or perspective? Or
for me, the shift in my spiritual life happened planting trees in Haiti. And I had worked in Haiti for a bunch of years before coming back to Albuquerque. And a book I think that was written by a Canadian. It's called The Man Who Planted Trees and Grew Hope, I think is the name of it. And it was a major life changer for me. And so I find myself even walking along, taking pictures of trees, taking pictures of the tree trunks. Yeah, I'm losing my vision, but I don't care. I just want to be able to see these trees and the beauty of bark, particularly. I'm fascinated by as I grow older, and it's very centering for me.
I'm seeing a question in the chat. someone interested in more resources from the farmers, is there a web place, someplace you can learn these things, like how to get your hands on one of those corn shellers for a school?
So the seed company that Theo has started and that we all help with has a website. So I can put that in the chat if that's not like a conflict of interest. As far as corn shellers specifically, I do sell those. I also have an article I wrote on how to make them. And so I can definitely put that in the chat.
Yeah, and it's awkward because, yeah, the business is one of the main outreach things we're doing right now. But it has a bunch of articles which are free and available for everyone, which talk more about some of the practical stuff. And I don't ship to the US for all you Americans, but there are wonderful resources for finding seeds through Seed Savers Exchange, which is a nonprofit seed sharing network. And in Canada, Seeds of Diversity Canada is a similar organization, which we're a part of as well.
But yeah, if anyone has like specific technical questions about kind of how we're doing things and what we've figured out, we would love to talk about that and correspond about that. So we can put our email in the chat and you're welcome to contact us that way too.
Can I speak, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Rachel Bag from India. I belong to basically a TAVI group, a sort of organization, which is theologically trained Anabaptist Women of India. That is theologically trained women of our Mennonite churches in India, a grouping, an association. And from that perspective, I have been interested to listen this particular. I thank the presenter for their presentation, their stories and efforts which they have taken and contributed towards the pollination of this particular climate change issue. However, I would like to know that how you have seen or how you have decided that the changes which you are trying to do will be sustainable, will be continuing. Have you prepared any, have you prepared the generation or your next generation to continue that pollination in your own particular area or in your own particular property? You know, how you have thought about it. That's what is I would like to know. And certainly I would like to see that these things are applicable in Indian context, in Indian culture and context. However, I would like to share one thing, that in India nowadays, clay pot are being prepared with a very solid soil and used for cooking. And that is very encouraging. Even they are making pressure cooker out of that soil, solid concrete soil. And I was very encouraged that the people who do not know the Lord and who are less aware about the creation in terms of religious concepts, but they are concerned that whatever we are using, pots and other things, they are not healthy for us. And they have come up with the idea of making clay pots. So my question still remains that have you planned how to sustain the changes which you have done? Thank you very much.
Kind of a hard question.
We don't have any clever answer. To a certain extent, Theo and I are that next generation at this point.
Yes.
And so we're nearer the start of our lives. And so we can do things for a while. I would say, I don't know how things will look here in our particular place long term if people will continue to work in our place. Hopefully. We are already trying to kind of pass on pieces of it. So like that article about the corn sheller that I posted is an example of that, where I'm hoping at least that little piece of it can be passed on and be useful to someone else. So kind of contribute to the ongoing movement. But yeah, that's something that we definitely want to keep working on.
Yeah.
we have time for one more question, and I'm seeing there's a question in the chat about wanting to hear a little more from Donna about the waste audit she carried out. What did you find? What have you changed as a result? Are you composting on church property?
Yes, we are composting on church property. We had 3 different styles of bins that we tested out, and the tumbler was a little bit too small. It wasn't working very well. We gave it to the service adventure unit. We have a pallet style bin that's much larger and composts very well. We also have more of a chicken wire bin. We have to water it with all the leftover tea water and coffee to keep it wet enough. So yes, we do compost on church property, and it's been really successful. We've had, 35-gallon buckets one year that we distributed either on the property or to church members for use in their gardens. Oh, the waste audit. Yeah, we actually took a scale and went to the dumpster, pulled everything out, divided it up into different categories. And as a result of that, we discovered that there was a lot of organic matter. And so the composting program really took off at that point. And unfortunately, we still have a lot of things that are brought to church in plastic containers, which we do reuse when people come to a potluck and want to take some things home to people that weren't able to come or some situation like that. But we still do have much more waste than I would prefer to see. It's a slow go, sorry.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm sure there's lots more we could talk about. But right now we're going to cut back to the Dougs. They will close out our official program, and then some of us can stick around if some more of you would like to ask a few questions and follow up on things you didn't get to hear.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I'll start. It is good conversation. I just want to mention a few things before I need to leave right here at 10 o'clock to teach a class. But one of them is just so grateful. Thank you to all the presenters throughout this series of 5 webinars. Thank you to ACC to work with the task force on giving voice to these stories, and especially to Sierra. Sierra has put the most hours into this entire project in a very capable way. 2 things that I want to mention from the task force side and from this webinar side. So one is that watch for an email on a survey about the webinars so that you can give feedback. The task force and ACC want to continue to explore how we can inspire each other, share stories, and continue to build community around creation care. So we would really value your feedback on that survey that will be coming for you. And then one thing from Mennonite World Conference, the task force, Mennonite World Conference has for years been sort of taxing our air travel from the organization as a way of offsetting. And we will be announcing, this is kind of a pre-announcement for a small grants program for creation care activities that comes through that fund. And especially for Global South constituents members. So that should be rolled out at some point here, but this is just to give you a heads up on that. So thank you again, everybody, so much. And I would love to stay and hear more conversation, but we'll need to go to class. So I'll pass it over to the other Doug.
Thank you, the other Doug. And I just wanted to highlight a particular resource for US folks that are here. And I just put up there's a Global Voices tour going through the US starting this week. And there was a tour through, and this is a partnership we have with MCC. MCC Canada did it this November, I think, with speakers from Nepal and Colombia. And we have speakers, both are African. One works with MCC in Zimbabwe, the other works with MCC in Cambodia. Victor Odinda and Caroline Pugani, and I shared the link that shows where they'll be doing public events. So they'll be educating North Americans in particular, well, U.S. for this particular event on how they're adapting to climate changes. And just a reminder, we already posted about this, but there is both a book and it's a web series as well. So I do invite you to think about for this Lent, reading one of the stories from Climate Pollinator each day. And I don't know if Jennifer, if you give the official word to close, but we're also then, yeah, whoever wants to stay around can stay around.
Well, yeah, we are at our time. If you need to go, we are officially concluding our time.